So I'm Lynn Ruane. I'm a senator in the Irish Parliament. I was elected in 2016, and previously to that I developed drug services across many different working class communities in Dublin. Since being in the Senate, I will probably say the Seanad, but the Senate, it's obviously the Irish translation is Seanad Éireann, which is the Senate. My first piece of legislation that I tabled was actually on drug decriminalisation of simple possession, and at the time you could see there wasn't huge support, maybe a small bit of support, and that would have been in 2017. And I think in the space between then and now, I think a huge amount has changed in terms of people's openness once they hear the evidence and they understand the issue and they understand that prohibition has not worked as any sort of deterrent, and actually between the judiciary and policing, that those policies are actually quite harmful. After the decrim legislation hit the floor, the minister at the time would have asked me to pause the vote on that piece of legislation, because they wanted to carry out a public consultation to kind of get the feel of the nation, I suppose, on their views on drugs policy. And that was the largest ever response to a consultation from a state department, the health department. And I had in and around 22,000 responses, largely and overwhelmingly pointing towards a health-led approach to drugs possession. From there, the department set up a committee, a working group, which was led by a retired judge at the time. And I think that they kind of maybe took a more retrograde step, not taking on board, I suppose, the intent of the public consultation. And the judge at the time, who was the chair, the retired judge, he had a minority report that went completely against any sort of drug decriminalisation. But the rest of the committee suggested a number of different options, and decriminalisation was not one of those options. A kind of adult caution system was in there. And really, that's down to policing, and I think that that's very clear. That's down to policing, and policing not wanting to actually give up their stop and search powers, which is harmful to communities, especially communities that are over-policed. Because it's just a very actually classist application of the law in terms of who's most likely to encounter a guard, a policeman in their day. And the communities that are most affected and most impacted by drug use are going to be the ones that encounter guards on a much regular basis. So from there, we kind of moved then into a new iteration of the government. There was a lot of campaigning at the time, and the Green Party, Nessa Horgan particularly, campaigned to have a citizens' assembly on drugs to be part of the programme for government. And thankfully that happened. It happened a bit late in the government's term for me, because now we're up against the clock, because that citizens' assembly reported. It was a very positive engagement with huge support again for the decriminalisation of the individual, and for the type of drug doesn't matter. It's about the person, and it's person-centred, and it's to ensure that people do not end up in the criminal justice system for their personal drug use or possession, regardless of whether that's drug dependency or recreational drug use. So from there now, it was back to Parliament, because obviously they have to legislate, and a special committee was set up that was made up of the both houses, the upper and lower house, of which I am on that committee. And we've been looking at the different policies from around the world. We've been getting the evidence in, and it's really up to us now to create legislation that actually stays true to what the public have been saying for many, many years. I think politicians always felt that the public was against this, but as is usually the case, the public is always way ahead of the media, of the institutions, and of the politicians. So really now, this committee, this Oireachtas committee, Irish Parliament, is due to report on its findings, and we've heard from people from around the world, you know, police commanders, UN commissioners, lots of different people that are working in places who have decriminalised. So hopefully by December this year, that Oireachtas committee will report on its findings, and then it's over to government to legislate. And the reason why I say I think it happened a bit late in the government's term is we are facing into an election very soon. So my fear obviously is that a report will be developed and then we have to start all over again with a new government. But I do hope that that's not the case. I do hope that the conversation has changed enough that it just automatically falls into the next government.
Thank you, Lynn. You've addressed hope and you've addressed the great work that's being done by you here in Dublin and Ireland. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.